Morning guys from Tallinn and Estonia. I'm heading back to Riga today and that involves me taking two trains. The first one to a place called Valga, which is on the Estonian-Latvian border, where I've got to spend about 3.5 hours there because the train from there to Riga doesn't show up till about 3 o'clock. I don't know why they can't time their trains a little bit better, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, so the second train is going to take me on to Riga. And I should get into Riga at about 6 o'clock tonight. So it's going to be a bit of a trek, this one. But I wanted to try out the trains and I wanted to show them to you guys too. So come with me for this journey and I'll see you again somewhere along the line. Cheers for now.
Okay, so I left the hotel, which was right next to the station incidentally, and headed off towards the ticket office. The terminus here at Tallinn is quite modern, but it's totally featureless in my opinion. These displays at the end of the platform were good though, really useful for determining which service I needed. Mine was the 809, shown here, and once I knew where that was, I made my way towards the train. The entire Estonian passenger network is served by these orange and black Stadler Flirt electric and diesel electric train sets, operated by the state-owned company Elron. They seem to be everywhere at the station. And note there's first class accommodation at the front and rear of the train, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. The cost for the first leg of this journey from Tallinn to Valga was €17.60, and that was for a journey of approximately 200 kilometres. It would take about 3 hours and 19 minutes. I was travelling in standard class today, and after boarding I headed towards the front of the train to try and find a seat. First impressions, yeah, it was very modern, clean and spacious. This latter observation isn't really surprising. The network uses the 4'11" and 27/32" Russian gauge track throughout. I sat down on one of the higher seats above the wheels, which I tend to prefer on these types of train, just because I can see more really. We left Tallinn in rather murky weather, which would hopefully improve as we made our way towards Tartu and then to Valga. Note the announcements, they were in both Estonian and English, which was obviously very useful for me.
Peatume Kitsekülas, Ülemistel, Tapal, Tammsalus, Jõgeval ja Tartus. Alates Tartust kõigis peatustes. Head reisi! Welcome aboard the express train to Tartu and Valga. Between Tallinn and Tartu, this train stops only at Kitseküla, Ülemistel, Tapal, Tammsalu, Jõgeval and Tartu. Between Tartu and Valga, the train stops at all the stations. Enjoy the journey.
The seating was a mixture of airline style and ones that face each other, arranged in a 2-3 configuration. In the seats that face each other, where I was, you will find a useful side table with a small integral litter bin for your convenience. Now below the table is a double power socket, though there's no USB charging, so you will have to make sure that you've got your own plug adapter with you. The seats themselves are divided by a lifting armrest. I found the padding a little hard, but we'd see how that felt by the time we'd arrived in Valga. I note that there is plenty of legroom in these facing seats, and much better than the airline style alternative elsewhere in the carriage, which, incidentally, didn't appear to have the provision of either seatback tables or power supply. There is overhead storage above both sets of seats, while space is somewhat inhibited for the higher seats due to the proximity of the roof. There's ample really, and there's lots of space elsewhere in the train if need be. Wi-Fi was available and reasonably quick and good for most tasks, apart from streaming lots of video, but you wouldn't really expect that anyway, and it was certainly better than most of the train companies I've travelled on recently. Anyway, let's get on with the journey. We'll have a look outside, and I'll tell you what, let's hope the weather improves as we head towards our first major stop on the line, which is Tartu. Here we are arriving at Tapa, which is a real railway town and historically the base of the Estonian military throughout its history. And note how the platforms are all of a similar style and there's not much shelter from the elements either. I must admit there wasn't a massive amount to see scenery wise on this part of the journey, but here we are crossing the Emajogi River on the newly constructed Janis Raudteesilt Bridge, and I really apologise for my pronunciation on all those places. After we left Tartu, I thought I'd have a bit of a wander into the first class section of the train. I was also going to do a speed test here, as I was really interested to see how fast we were travelling, but it actually gives you this information, I noticed, along with the outside temperature on the destination displays as shown here. Well, there's not much difference to the seating in first class as opposed to standard, to be honest, and a bit of extra padding, slightly wider, and obviously it's in a 2-2 configuration. The tables are a lot bigger and more akin to UK style, I would say, and you do get carpet in this part of the carriage. Overall though, I was quite happy with standard class. There was an interesting narrow piece of glass above the access door to the driver's cab here, which enabled me to get a fairly average shot of the driver. As I turned around though, the guard had by magic appeared from nowhere and was glaring at me. I took that as a sign to return to my seat. So on to the loo review. Latch locking and with a big mirror in situ. The toilet had baby changing facilities and grab handles, everything you would expect really from an all-purpose accessible facility. The area was clean throughout, water, soap and hand dryer worked as expected, though unusually the toilet flush was located above the sink. Now I think this is actually an excellent idea, because it means that you should only flush the loo after you've washed your hands. A small detail, but obviously well thought out and hygienically very practical. Litter bin below the mirror completes our review, and it's onwards towards Valga. We arrived at a place called Keene, population 331, And as I looked out of the window, I couldn't help thinking how very laid back the train dispatchers were in this part of the world. We approached the outskirts of Valga and the quite sizable marshalling yards that surrounded the station. Now, as well as being a border town, this was obviously a big railway town too, and there was lots of freight trains coming and going when I was there. Anyway, we arrived pretty much on time, and after disembarking, I was pleased to find that it had stopped raining momentarily. Right then guys, I am in Valga, which is the halfway point really, and pretty much on the border of Estonia and Latvia. Now my Latvian train doesn't actually get here until 1500 and it's 1200 at the moment, so I'm going to have to find something to do for the next 3 hours. And it doesn't look like there's much to do here yet, although I might head off over that bridge and I'm going to try and find a coffee or something. It'll be interesting to see whether there's anything about. Unfortunately there's nothing in the station building, to be honest, so yeah, we'll go and see what it's like, and I'll see you in a bit. But the station building itself was absolutely fantastic. I mean, look at the arched roof here. It reminded me more of a church than a railway station, especially with these balconies in the corners and along the far windows. There were a few people about, but as I said, nothing was really open. There were several disused parts of the station, which led me to believe that it must have been a much busier place in years gone by. If anybody has any more information on the station and its historical significance, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be really interested to find out. Estonian arrivals and departures were displayed on a screen above the information board here, though I couldn't see anything about my Latvian train, which was due to depart at about 3 o'clock. And then I noticed there was a little piece of paper pinned to the board with the relevant information on it. Now, I trusted this to be correct. The 1504 Valga to Riga train, number 871, was the one that I wanted. And note the price as well, a very reasonable €5.22. And also there was an explanation in English of how to buy a ticket and where the train departed from. And it's obviously designed for tourists, isn't it, this? Anyway, armed with the confidence that the train was actually going to turn up, I headed out of the station and on my 3-hour voyage of discovery. Well, firstly, I had a quick look at the marshalling yards that really seemed to engulf the station itself. And this was quite a busy area, lots of wagons, sheds and buildings, as you would expect, plus a few old diesel locomotives standing around waiting to be used. And there's a fantastic old water tower here still standing, and you can get some great views looking back at Valga station from here as well. And after that I had a wander into town, and unfortunately the local museum was closed, but I did have a wander into the park behind it. I saw a few things of note, and I also visited the local sports ground. And if you want to see this footage in its entirety, I'll pop it on my Facebook page and drop the link below in the description. And finally, to top it all off, I did actually manage to grab my coffee and a cream cake, and I saw this fantastic steam locomotive on the road back to the station as well. When I got back to the station, it was really quiet. I went through the door towards the platforms and there was no one about here either. And my train had arrived at this point, as you can see, and it was waiting for me over there on platform 2. I did see this passing loco calling what I think was some kind of mobile laboratory. Well, if anybody knows what this is, then please let me know in the comments below. Okay then guys, I am back at Valga railway station this afternoon for the second leg of my journey down to Riga, and I am going to be taking it on this, an RVR DR1, which looks like a classic, doesn't it? I tell you what, I'm really looking forward to this. The journey's about 3 hours long, and getting into Riga around about 6 o'clock this evening. So I'm going to shoot some great footage on the way, give you a feel for what it's like inside the train as well. So hope you can stick with me for this second leg of the journey, and I will catch you in a bit. Cheers for now. I made my way across the tracks towards it. Now I think I was the first one here. Like I said, there didn't seem to be anybody around, let alone passengers. There was no train crew either at this stage, but the doors were open, so I just got on board. And the interior doors, as you can see, are opened manually by trying to force them apart. Our first impressions of the inside were pretty basic. The seats seemed a bit small for the carriage in my opinion. Anyway, I wandered down the aisle and chose a seat, and after a while some passengers and the train crew arrived. Our documents were checked, we paid our fares, and we were ready to depart. Oh, by the way, look how the weather's changed. Fantastic blue skies as we left Valga. The interior scenery doesn't really change much between Estonia and Latvia in my opinion. There are lots of forestry, and most of the rail freight actually seem to consist of timber wagons and tankers. A pleasant enough trip though, and I found the ride really quite smooth. So, time to look at the seats on this train. The whole carriage was laid out in a 2-2 airline style configuration. Interestingly, one side faced the way we were travelling and the other side the opposite. And on the back of each seat is a fold-down table with an integrated cup holder on the underside. It didn't look like it had been cleaned much ever, to be honest, but overall it is quite a useful attachment, although if you're eating you need to put the food on your lap or on the other table if it's quiet, of course. And the table itself also had space for a cup, and this was clean, and yeah, it was decent enough really, size-wise. Leg room was pretty good. I don't think there's any desire to cram people in on this train, to be honest, so that helps in this respect. And I think the carriage on the day of travel was about a third full, if that. I assumed these two buttons were something to do with the seat recline. Well, anyway, I couldn't get them to work. Let me know if you have any ideas about these in the comments below. I couldn't find any charging points, so battery packs are required if you're going to be running low on power on this leg of the journey. Now, the seats themselves had this interesting squiggle design, and padding was reasonable and they looked clean enough. I had a stab at seeing if there was any Wi-Fi aboard, but unsurprisingly for this train there wasn't. Anyway, let's carry on with the journey. We passed some more tankers as we approached Kalns, which was a small town just to the east of Riga. This is the site, incidentally, of a vast underground gas storage facility which provides much of the Baltic States and parts of northwestern Russia with their gas during the winter months. We were on the outskirts of Riga by now, and I was starting to get a little bit hungry, to be honest. You probably won't be surprised to hear that there are no catering services on either this train or the Estonian service we saw a little bit earlier on. There's not even any vending machines either, so obviously make sure that you do stock up on provisions before you start out. Okay guys, that was 3 hours on the DR1AM, all the way from Valga to Riga. And what do you think? It was alright, wasn't it, really? Classic ride in many respects. The interior was perfectly good, comfortable. Needed a little bit of a clean. It was a little bit rough around the edges. Unfortunately the toilet was closed, so I couldn't do a loo review this time round. But I hope it gave you a feel for the kind of train you're going to get on a long distance journey in Latvia. Anyway, I'm going to go to the hotel now. It's my last night here, so I'm going to just check in and then go out and enjoy myself. Thanks very much for watching, and until the next time guys, cheers for now.